Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Rank 10 Yu-Gi-Oh's Legacy of the Worthless! If you aren't familiar yet, in this series we're looking at the most infuriatingly unplayable archetypes ever shed out by Konami's executive asshole, what exactly makes those archetypes so horrible, and what needs to be improved in order for them to be less awful. The grading scale we use involves consistency, power, comeback ability, protection and versatility, and an archetype is considered terrible if it doesn't particularly excel in any of these categories. With that said, let's begin this episode's topic. Here are a few things I know about Scandinavia. Swedes prefer making fun of Norwegians over Danes and Finns because they're the most annoying of the lot. They're super rich because they have oil, they're all perky outdoor types who go mountain climbing to take care of their hangovers, and skin bronzer is their national face cream. But what most people like you, me and that guy over there think of when someone mentions Norway is their extensive majestic mythology filled with wondrous imagery such as Loki giving birth to an 8-legged horse, a detail Marvel conveniently decided to skip in their adaptation of the stories, but I digress. Since Konami sometimes runs out of ideas for its own Yu-Gi-Oh designs, one time they decided that the best course of action in Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds was to let Yusei's team duke it out against Nordic gods of all things, and then proceeded to print out almost every piece of support for those cards from the anime, no matter how utterly useless they were. Kinda sad that this is already the second 5Ds archetype we're covering in this series, but what can I do when everything after the Dark Signers arc was struggling harder than Madonna's tits to stay relevant? Now with all that said, let's check the monster lineup. So first of all, the Nordics include 3 separate sub-archetypes, as obnoxiously confusing as that is already. See, they focus on 3 level 10 synchro monsters which all require different kinds of tuners. For Loki it's Nordic ALFAR, for THOR it's Nordic Beast, and for Odin it's Nordic Ascendant. We'll review each group separately along with their AISIR synchro monsters, starting with ALFARs and Loki. First is Dverg of the Nordic ALFAR, a level 1 monster whose effect allows you to normal summon an additional Nordic monster during the turn it's summoned. Also, when it's sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Nordic relic from the graveyard to your hand. More on those later, but regarding the first effect, I have a feeling this would have been decent if the monster in question was a tuner, since level 1 is extremely good for synchro plays as we all know, but sadly Dverg feels like a missed opportunity. I feel it needs to be a tuner or at least have some kind of level manipulation to make itself more useful. As it stands right now, it's not nearly the worst Nordic monster, but it absolutely begs for some improvement. Next up is probably the best ALFAR tuner, even though that doesn't say much. Mara is a level 2 tuner which effect states that if you were to use it for a synchro summon, the other synchro materials must be 2 Nordic monsters in your hand. This looked like a really good effect until I took like 5 seconds to think about it. Basically you can only synchro summon with this card if you use exactly 2 Nordic monsters in your hand along with it. Not on the field, not 3 or 1, specifically 2 Nordics in the hand. And apparently we're supposed to tolerate this because it's a tuner and with 2 level 4s it can summon Loki, while leaving you with a big hand minus. But hey, it's an archetype from the synchro era, god forbid it let you summon a high level monster without getting rid of your entire hand first. Next up on the list, and I'm going to read these names the way they're read in my language because attempting English on these things would require me to possess at least 2 additional tongues, is Ljosalf of the Nordic ALFAR. It's a level 4 non-tuner which effect is the following. When this card is normal summoned, you can select 1 face-up monster you control, except this one, special summon 1 Nordic monster from the hand whose level is lower to or equal to the selected monster's level. So, what exactly was wrong with just making this effect into special summon a Nordic monster from your hand? That's what you want to be doing with this thing anyway, but the necessity of having a monster on the field already feels like they slapped a restriction on it because... As we'll see later, this archetype is not exactly good at keeping field presence long enough for this thing to go off, so unless you're confident in your Nordic deck's swarming ability, leave this one out. The final ALFAR monster is as underwhelming as the fact that it's a level 5 with 1400 attack and 1600 defense. Oh, and it's a tuner, so that definitely makes it good, am I right? When Svartalf is normal summoned, you can add 1 Nordic monster from your graveyard to the hand. Because that would be so worth tributing for. The first time I read this effect, my brain turned off for like half a second and I thought it said when it's normal summoned, special summon a Nordic monster from the graveyard, and that would have actually been pretty cool. Dverg into Svartalf, use the ladder to revive Dverg, make a level 6 synchro, simple and easy. But nah, they want you to go out of your way to normal summon this pink cream ball and be satisfied with getting a Nordic back into your hand. Needless to say, totally not worth it. And now we come to the first AISIR boss monster, the Norse god of mischief, Loki, Lord of the AISIR. It's a level 10 synchro with 3300 attack and 3000 defense, requires 1 Nordic ALFAR tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters, and has the following effect. Once per turn, you can negate and destroy a spell or trap card activated by your opponent during your battle phase. During the end phase, if this card was destroyed by battle or card effect this turn, you can banish one Nordic ALFAR tuner monster from the graveyard to special summon this card, and if you do, add one trap card from your graveyard to your hand. Here we have a textbook example of an anime card being brought into the real game with as little effort of improving it as possible. The protection effect saves you from Mirror Force or a straight deep prison, and that's about it, and while I would argue that the revival effect along with trap recycling is kinda neat, the problem is that nobody really relies on ALFARs to summon Loki in the first place for a couple of reasons. One, he's easily the worst Nordic synchro, and two, there's a card that enables you to summon Loki and Thor without using their specific tuner monsters, which we'll talk about later. But in conclusion, ALFARs and Loki are easily the worst branch of this archetype. Moving on to the second branch, Nordic Beasts and Thor, we get a glimpse of what Nordics could have been capable of, starting off with Tangnoster of the Nordic Beasts. Its level is 3, and when a monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it from the hand. Also, when it's changed from defense to attack position, you can special summon a Nordic Beast monster from your deck in defense position. So first of all, it gives you some tolerable recovery considering the year it was released in, and during your next turn you can turn it upwards to place a beast from your deck onto the field. I'm a huge sucker for special summoning from the deck, and while today this card isn't exactly considered anything particularly impressive, it's still one of the few playmakers the Nordics have left. Well, it and the next monster, that being Tangrisnir of the Nordic Beasts. It's another level 3, and when it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 2 level 3 tokens with 0 attack and defense. The same thing I said for Tangnoster goes here. Today these tokens would easily be taken care of before your turn even arrives, but getting 2 free tokens in a synchro focus deck is pretty dang good from my point of view. I wish the condition of getting them was a little less tragic, but combined with a certain level 4 tuner, it can easily give you a level 7 or even 10 synchro monster, provided the tokens survive. It also helps that you can summon it by Tangnoster's effect, enabling a rank 3 Xyz play, because that's the way of the future. So then, after a good start with the Nordic Beasts, let's check out their next monster, Garmr. It's a level 4 non-tuner whose effect is, if this card battles a level 4 or lower monster, you can return that monster to the hand after damage calculation. Okay, I'm gonna look on the positive side and point out that this card absolutely kicks ass in the Cloudian matchup. Just fuck it, next monster! Gold fuck you, I am not even attempting to pronounce this, of the Nordic Beasts, is a level 4 tuner which allows you to special summon it from the hand if the opponent controls a synchro monster and you control no monsters. Obviously a relic of an era long gone, in some extremely rare situations you will be able to special summon it for free and then hopefully proceed to make a decent synchro monster, but don't forget he is also summonable with Tangnoster and is the only Nordic Beast tuner monster, which serves for calling for that guy Marvel makes movies about, Thor, Lord of the AISIR. Level 10 Synchro requires 1 Nordic Beast tuner and 2 or more of any non-tuner monsters and has the following effect. Once per turn you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent controls until the end phase. Then, same as Loki, during the turn it was destroyed, you can banish a Nordic Beast tuner from the graveyard to revive this card, and then you can burn your opponent for 800 damage. Well, the first effect is okay-ish. I can't really think of too many relevant monsters which effects you would want to negate on your turn, maybe Denko Seka or Dark Destroyer or Magispectors, although good luck summoning this thing against Magispectors in the first place, and getting 1 revival and 800 burn damage isn't really that impressive. However, I am willing to cut Thor some slack because the synergy between Nordic Beasts makes him significantly easier to summon than Loki, giving you a bigger beater with an effect that's arguably on the same position on the scale of usefulness. Finally, moving on to the last branch, Nordic Ascendants and Odin, we start off with the card with the most specifically restrictive effect in the universe. Valkyria of the Nordic Ascendant is a level 2 tuner with this effect. When this card is normal summoned, if your opponent controls a monster and you control no other cards, you can banish 2 Nordic monsters from your hand to special summon 2 Einherjar tokens, which are level 4 and have 1000 attack and defense. If you attended elementary school, or if you are currently attending it, which is not out of the question considering you're watching Yu-Gi-Oh videos on the internet, you might deduce that 2 plus 4 plus 4 equals 10 equals Odin, but the cost behind spawning these tokens is so absolutely out the ass that it ultimately doesn't pay off in the end. Probably the only way this could ever be useful is if you're going second and the opponent has an established field, and even then you need 2 more Nordics in the hand to pull it off. I think the biggest crime with this card is that you can't even use it to make a comeback, because if you're already in a hard minus and draw into this, it's dead in your hand because you need 2 more cards to even make it work. Next up is Mimir of the Nordic Ascendant, and this guy should have probably retired while he still didn't have the beard. Once per turn at the start of your standby phase, if you control a Nordic monster, you can discard one spell card to special summon this card from the graveyard. I might have tolerated this if he was a tuner, since level 2 is a pretty good one for those, but not only is it not a tuner, the problem is also in the fact that Nordic monsters rarely stay on the field after the opponent's turn for this guy to go off. Oh, and if you thought discarding spells is something Nordics would benefit from, I'm sad to inform you that this is not the case. He has that specific cost because they simply couldn't think of any other specific cost. The final Ascendant Master is Vanadis, and for this one Konami decided to pull their head out of their ass for a moment and actually make something usable. It's a level 4 tuner with the following effect. You can substitute this card for any one Nordic tuner monster for a Synchro Summon, God fucking bless. If it's used for a Synchro Summon, all other materials must be Nordic monsters. Once per turn you can send a Nordic monster from your deck to the graveyard to change this card's level to the level of that monster. See this? This is how you make a goddamn archetype exclusive tuner. It's got it all. It can be used as an ALFAR or a beast, it's limited to its own archetype, and has a level changing ability which allows for more variety in synchro summons. It's also one of the reasons why nobody who actually wants to summon Loki even uses ALFARs. Overall, while not perfect, it's still a pretty damn nice card, and I wish the rest of the archetype had this much thought put into it. Finally we come to Odin, father of the AISIR and the bossiest of the Nordic bosses. It requires a Nordic Ascendant tuner and 2 or more tuners, it has a big 4000 body and the following effect. Once per turn during your main phase, you can activate this effect to make this card unaffected by spells and traps until the end phase. Blah blah, during the end phase when it was destroyed, banish Ascendant tuner to revive this card, and if you do, draw one card. Well, I would argue that the revival effect is pretty neat because it's one of the very few ways this deck can plus. What immensely pains me about the first effect is that it's not a quick effect, meaning that if this gets targeted by something like compulsory for example, you cannot respond to it with the immunity effect and you will lose the monster. This almost puts the effect on the same scale as Loki. It will probably help you during your battle phase and that's about it. The best thing Odin has going for it is the 4000 body and that okay-ish revival effect. I would talk about which one of the Nordic gods I consider best, but it's like every single one of them is equally irrelevant considering their underwhelming revival effects and the over-reliance on working only during their controller's turn. Sadly, even after 14 monsters, we still have a long way to go, so hold on to your little tushes as we move on to Tier of the Nordic Champions. It's a level 4 with 2000 attack and defense, and while it's on the field, it's the only Nordic monster your opponent can attack, but if there is no other Nordic monster on the field, the card is destroyed. Just not worth it. Everyone and their mother nowadays has access to non-attacking removal, and while I would argue that he would be nice if he also protected from effect targeting, the fact that he blows up if no Nordics are on the field makes it completely worthless. Guess this guy's not Tier 1. For the last 2 monsters we have the duo of Fenrir the Nordic Wolf and Jormungandr the Nordic Serpent. Why duo? Because their effects on their own make absolutely no sense and are obviously meant to be used in tandem. Fenrir is a level 10 monster which cannot be normal summoned. During your main phase 2, you can special summon it to your opponent's side of the field in defense position if you control an AESIR monster. If there are no AESIR monsters on the field, destroy this card. Now the following part obviously refers to the opponent while Fenrir is in their control. At the start of your battle phase, change all defense position monsters you control to attack position and both players take damage involving this card. Does this look completely pointless to you? Well, here's Jormungandr. It also cannot be normal summoned, then you can give it to your opponent if you control an AESIR monster. If it's changed from defense to attack position, its controller takes 3000 damage, and this effect can only be used once. So to narrow this down, you need to work your ass off to summon a level 10 synchro, then give your opponent 2 huge beaters of which one of them might be bigger than your AESIR monster, then wait until the opponent's battle phase for Jormungandr to be changed to attack position by Fenrir and burn your opponent for 3000 damage. True, if they destroy the AESIR monster they both blow up, but seriously now, ask yourself if it's worth going through all this bullshit just so you can pull off that burn effect once, which most likely won't even end up being relevant in the long run. No, it's not. And with that, we're finally done with the monster lineup. Needless to say, it's not impressive. Obviously not much can be done to salvage the archetype at this point, but hey, it's my show and over here we scrape the bottom of the barrel for every piece of bullshit support made for the cards we're talking about, and we might as well start off with the field spell, the Nordic Lights. Nordic monsters on the field cannot be destroyed by battle. If this card on the field is destroyed, destroy all Nordic monsters on the field. Because battle protection is precisely what I needed, right? Feel like making use of Tagnoster and Tangrisnir? Well now you can't! Oh, and also your whole field dies to MST. Good job! Next up we have the equip spell Nordic Relic Dropnir. You can equip it to an AISIR or a Nordic monster, it gains 800 attack, and if this card is destroyed by a card effect, you can add a Nordic Relic from your deck to your hand. It's a decent but irrelevant stat boost, and the reliance on it getting destroyed by an effect to perform a search makes it way too slow. Next. March Towards Ragnarok is a quick play spell that lets you target an AISIR monster you control and make it unaffected by spell and trap effects until the end phase, at the cost of its effects being negated. It kinda baffles me they made several support cards specifically for the 3 AISIR monsters, and while this one is decent due to being a quick play protection card, it's risky to even consider running it because you won't always have an AISIR monster on board, so it can result in some major dead draws. Then we have a... Oh, I am so pronouncing this as American as humanly possible. Okay, here we go. Gotterdammerung, which does the following. Target one AISIR monster you control. Give control of that monster to your opponent. During your opponent's end phase, destroy that monster, and if you do, banish all cards your opponent controls. Okay, the card is bad, it gives the opponent a huge monster along with the possibility of making you get OTK'd, and that's only if you had that huge monster in the first place. But I absolutely love how balls to the wall the effect is if you manage to pull it off. In my entire experience of playing Nordics, I only successfully resolved Gotterdammerung once against a drunk Ice Barrier player, but the satisfaction was present nonetheless. Don't run it if you wanna do anything worthwhile with the deck, but do run it if you wanna give yourself a stupid fun challenge. Well, the spells are shit, so let's look at the traps, which mostly consist of the earlier mentioned Nordic relics, starting off with Livaten. Target one face-up monster on the field that destroyed the monster by battle this turn, destroy it. Cards and effects cannot be activated in response to this card's activation. This kinda screams starter pack material. It's not even direct Nordic support, but if this was a few years ago, I guess I'd consider running it to get revenge for my slaughtered goats, I mean Nordic beasts. Right now though, it's really not good. Nordic Relic Brisingamen lets you target one monster you control and one monster your opponent controls and makes the attack of your monster equal to the opponent's monster's original attack until the end phase. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be support for, cause it certainly ain't Nordics. The only use I could think of for this thing in this specific archetype is activating it while Nordic Lights is on the field, but as we already established, you won't be running Nordic Lights unless you're a complete dolt. Nordic Relic Megingjord lets you double the attack and defense of a Nordic or AISIR monster you control until the end phase, but during that turn it cannot attack the opponent directly. I'm a bit on the fence with this one. It's a fantastic boost, it can help you get over lots of nasty stuff and can serve as decent protection in battles, but you usually don't want to have face-up Nordic monsters on the field during the opponent's turn where you could activate this, and AISIR monsters will very rarely, if ever, need to double their attack value to run something over. It's not terrible, but considering the power of the boost it gives, it's surprisingly situational. Nordic Relic Gungnir. Banish one face-up Nordic or AISIR monster you control, then target one card on the field. Destroy it, and during your second standby phase after this effect's activation, the banished monster returns to the field in face-up attack position. Hey, don't look at me, I don't know what they were thinking either. Next up we have a few more exclusive AISIR support cards, starting with Divine Relic Mjolnir. It lets one AISIR monster you control attack twice this turn. Simple enough, and with up to 4000 damage on board, you might make a few swings that would leave the opponent at the mercy of maybe one or two more attacks, but here we have the usual problem of AISIR exclusive cards, and that's the fact that only AISIR monsters can use them. Because what's it worth having a Mjolnir in the hand and a goat on the field? ODIN'S Eye is a continuous trap that during each player's standby phase lets you negate the effects of one AISIR monster you control to look at all cards in the opponent's hand and cards they have set on the field until the end phase. Interesting to say the least, and it can reveal a lot of valuable information such as trap cards or flip monsters, and I appreciate the fact that it's a continuous card so that it doesn't make you minus, but it's only for AISIRs. The scenario I'm imagining to go with this card is summoning an AISIR monster, activating this during the opponent's turn, seeing they have a bunch of cards in their hand that can completely destroy your face, and letting them activate them one by one, effectively turning ODIN'S Eye into a messenger of your impending doom. It's not necessarily a bad card, it's just what we call a win more card. If you can pull it off, nice, but if you can't, it probably made a bad situation even worse. Oh god, I can almost see the light, only 2 cards remaining. And oh boy, a Solemn card that's not on the limited list? Yep, thanks to it being an AISIR support card for some reason. Maybe this guy is actually Odin, but without all the fancy shit on him. Anyway, it's another continuous trap that prevents one AISIR monster you control from being targeted by card effects, but this card is sent to the graveyard during your second standby phase after activation. I'm just gonna point out that if the AISIRs were made today, this card wouldn't even be a thing, and the targeting protection would be a built-in effect they would have in the first place. So much like the other AISIR support cards, while not necessarily having a bad effect, the limitation of only affecting monsters that are super hard to summon makes them not worth running ever. And the final and quite possibly the funniest Nordic support card is Gleipnir, the Fetters of Fenrir. Simply enough, it lets you add one Nordic monster from your deck to your hand. Why is it the funniest? Because it's a search card that's a normal trap card. You bricked but you drew 3 Gleipnir? Well, wait a turn, hope you don't get OTK'd, and then proceed to start making plays. The biggest insult to injury in this case is that yes, Gleipnir is a definite 3-up staple in the deck because there is barely any search power in it at all. I cannot imagine how Nordics feel knowing that ice barriers have a better search card than they do. But let's look on the bright side. At least it didn't keep the anime effects which required you to control an AISIR monster to activate it. So now that we said all there is to say about this steaming pile of cardboard, let's make some grades. Consistency. Well, there's Gleipnir. Seriously though, if you open decently you can make a quick first turn AISIR monster, but opening decently with Nordics happens once in every 6 blue moons. Regarding power, the same thing I said about Mechlords a few videos ago works here. You will rarely get to the maximum power output the archetype has in store, but considering the fact that the AISIR monsters have ginormous attack values along with a lot of super strong relic support cards, the potential to hit hard is certainly there, so yeah, that's half a point. Comeback ability. Well, the synchros tend to stick around for a little bit after they're destroyed, but once they're taken care of, there's really not much you can do besides scooping. Literally none of the support cards help out in this case. As for the protection, oh, they have plenty. It's just all completely wrong. Nordic Lights goes against the logic of several cards in the deck. Solemn Authority and March Towards Ragnarok give great protection but only work on AISIR monsters. Oh, and speaking of AISIR monsters, their protection effects are flat out rendered meaningless by the fact that they're not quick effects. The protection in Nordics is like a soldier charging headfirst into battle while only wearing armor on his forehead and the back of his ankles. And versatility... Hey, I did say Garmer is a total beast in the Cloudian matchup, didn't I? No versatility. These guys aren't a counter to anything but themselves. Now that we know what all the major problems of Nordics are, it's time to outline how those problems could have been fixed. First of all, for the love of God, more searching, better searching. A single normal trap card that fetches a monster from the deck was barely enough in 2011, let alone today. Then, the deck needs a way to come back from a beatdown, mostly by revival spells that would either bring back main deck monsters or the synchros, or maybe something akin to Valkyrie but without an obnoxious cost to it. There also needs to be way more focus on the effects of the main deck monsters. So many of them are so incredibly slow and passive and barely a handful manages to work in synergy with each other. Non-tuners shouldn't be treated as tributes to a tuner but as companions, which is something this archetype completely ignores by making it impossible to synchro summon without making a minus. After you've synchro summoned, you'd expect that the monster you called forth was worth your investment, and seeing how the AISIR monsters get removed by anything and everything these days, their effects need to be made into something that would represent a problem for the opponent to deal with, as opposed to being a minor hindrance. For starters, quick effects would be nice. And for the last point, don't make the best support cards exclusive to the boss monsters. Either make their support into the effects the AISIR monsters have in the first place, or share the power with the rest of the Nordic archetype. Why not have spells or traps with dual effects, one that helps you summon the boss monsters, and another that helps them out once they hit the field? It's really not a scary thing to consider, you know. Nordics are probably the prime example of both how the adapting of anime archetypes used to be handled several years ago, as well as the all-over-the-place nature of a lot of archetypal synchro decks developed at the time. It's all there, big, underwhelming synchros, a huge number of main deck monsters of which only like 3 can be considered even remotely good, a bunch of spells and traps that just don't do anything, and an uneven balance between the good and the shitty adaptation of anime effects. I really wish they took time to wait and make this archetype into something good, because I love the theme. Norse mythology is such a rich pool of content you can adapt into amazing cards that live up to their legacy from the stories, but no, instead we got a rushed, crappy anime card collection that served only to fill up pack space with commons. Oh, and speaking of pack space, you know why people even bought Storm of Ragnarok, the set Nordics were released in and which was fucking themed after them? Hint, it wasn't Nordics, it might have been something considerably more Japanese. Ladies and Mental Gen, thank you for sitting through 20 plus minutes of my rambling about crappy cards. Also, thank you for getting me to 600 subscribers, and be sure to subscribe for even more Rank 10 content. See you next time.